In the bustling heart of Tokyo, where skyscrapers cast long shadows over ancient temples, the Hoshino Dojo stood as a bastion of tradition amid the city's relentless modernity. Its weathered wooden facade, tucked between a ramen shop and a neon-lit arcade, belied the sacred space within, a dojo where martial arts were practiced with reverence, its polished floors bearing the scars of countless battles. Master Hoshino, a wiry man in his 60s with a silver beard and eyes that seemed to pierce through pretense, had trained generations of martial artists. His philosophy was simple: strength without humility was hollow, and respect was the foundation of true power. His star pupil, Kenji Takahashi, embodied both the promise and peril of this creed. Kenji, at 26, was a prodigy whose lightning-fast kicks and unerring precision had earned him a fearsome reputation. His forms were flawless, his sparring sessions a blur of controlled aggression. But beneath his skill lay a flaw Master Hoshino had yet to mend, an arrogance that made him quick to judge and quicker to boast. Kenji thrived on the admiration of his peers, his confidence bordering on hubris. He saw himself as the dojo's undisputed alpha, a future sensei who'd one day inherit Hoshino's legacy. Yet, his tendency to mock those he deemed beneath him, newcomers, older students, anyone who didn't match his prowess, cast a shadow over his potential. On a humid summer evening in 2025, as cicadas hummed and the sun painted the sky in hues of amber, the dojo buzzed with its usual energy. Students practiced in disciplined rows, their ki shouts echoing off the walls. Kenji, fresh from a sparring session where he'd effortlessly dispatched a senior student, wiped sweat from his brow and surveyed the room with a self-assured grin. The sliding door creaked open, and a stranger stepped inside, drawing every eye in the dojo. The man was in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a jawline carved from granite. His black t-shirt and cargo pants were unassuming, but his presence carried a quiet intensity, like a storm waiting to break. He carried a worn gym bag, its faded fabric hinting at years of use. His steel blue eyes scanned the room, taking in the students, the mat, the framed calligraphy on the wall that read Bushido. To Kenji, he looked out of place, a foreigner, likely a tourist chasing a romanticized version of Japan, maybe hoping to snap a selfie in a GI for his social media. "Who's this guy?" Kenji whispered to his friend Daichi, loud enough for nearby students to hear. "Looks like he wandered off a movie set. Bet he thinks he's a samurai." Daichi snickered, and a ripple of laughter spread through the younger students. The stranger, however, didn't react. He approached Master Hoshino, who stood at the front of the dojo, and bowed deeply, his posture precise. In fluent, if slightly accented Japanese, he introduced himself as a visitor seeking to train for the evening. Hoshino, whose instincts rarely failed him, studied the man for a moment before nodding. "You are welcome here," he said, gesturing to a spare GI. "Join us." Kenji's eyes gleamed with mischief. A chance to humble a clueless outsider was too good to pass up. As the class transitioned to Humid, the sparring portion of the session, Kenji raised his hand. "Sensei, I'll take the new guy," he said, his tone dripping with bravado. The other students exchanged glances, sensing a spectacle. Hoshino's lips twitched, as if he knew something Kenji didn't, but he allowed it. "Very well. Show respect, Kenji." The stranger, now dressed in a slightly oversized GI, stepped onto the mat. His stance was relaxed, almost casual, but his feet were rooted, his shoulders squared. Kenji, bouncing lightly on his toes, sized him up. "You sure you're in the right place, old man?" He taunted, his voice carrying across the dojo. "This isn't a gym class. You might break a hip." The students laughed, but the stranger's expression remained impassive, his eyes locked on Kenji like a predator assessing prey. The sparring began with a formal bow, but Kenji wasted no time. He lunged forward, unleashing a barrage of high kicks aimed at the stranger's head, each strike a blur of speed and power. The students held their breath, expecting the newcomer to crumble under Kenji's onslaught. But the stranger moved with an almost supernatural grace, sidestepping each kick with minimal effort, his hands low and unmoving. Frustrated, Kenji pressed harder, throwing a spinning back fist with enough force to rattle teeth. In a flash, the stranger caught Kenji's wrist, twisting it with surgical precision. Kenji gasped, dropping to one knee, pain shooting up his arm. The dojo fell silent, the air thick with shock. "Enough," Hoshino called, his voice cutting through the tension. Kenji scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Who are you?" he demanded, rubbing his wrist. The stranger offered a faint smile, his voice low and gravelly with a British accent. "Just a guy who trains." The students murmured, confused, but Hoshino's eyes sparkled with recognition. He'd heard whispers in the martial arts world about a Westerner whose skills rivaled those of masters, a man whose training wasn't confined to dojos but forged in real-world battles. Jason Statham, the action star, was in Tokyo for a film shoot and had sought out the Hoshino Dojo to train quietly, far from the cameras and fans. Kenji, oblivious to the stranger's identity, was too prideful to let the moment pass. "I wasn't ready," he insisted, his voice tight. "Let's go again." Hoshino hesitated, then nodded, sensing a lesson unfolding. The second round was different. Kenji, fueled by humiliation, attacked with reckless fury, his strikes wild but devastatingly powerful. He threw a front kick, aiming for Statham's midsection, then followed with a combination of punches. Statham, however, was a master of economy. He parried the kick with a forearm, absorbing the impact without flinching, then countered with a swift elbow to Kenji's ribs. The blow stole Kenji's breath, and as he staggered, Statham executed a low sweep, sending him crashing to the mat. The impact echoed like a thunderclap. But instead of standing over him, Statham extended a hand, pulling Kenji to his feet with a nod. "Good effort," he said simply. Kenji, panting, stared at the man who dismantled him with such ease. The dojo was a sea of wide eyes and hushed whispers. Hoshino clapped once, signaling the end of the match, and dismissed the class to cool down. As the students dispersed, Kenji lingered, his mind racing. He'd never been humbled so thoroughly, and the sting of it warred with a growing curiosity. Who was this man? Why had Hoshino allowed him to train without question? The other students, sensing the shift in Kenji's demeanor, kept their distance, but Daichi nudged him. "You okay, man? That guy's no joke." Kenji didn't reply, his gaze fixed on the stranger, who was now speaking quietly with Hoshino near the dojo's shrine. Hoshino invited Statham to his small office for tea, a rare honor. Kenji, swallowing his pride, approached before they entered. "I'm sorry," he said, bowing deeply, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know who you were." Statham's weathered face softened. "Doesn't matter who I am, kid. Matters what you do with this." He tapped his temple, then his chest. "You're good. Really good. But you've got to respect the mat, or it'll teach you the hard way." Kenji nodded, his throat tight with a mix of shame and gratitude. Over tea, Statham shared fragments of his journey. He spoke of his days as a competitive diver, the discipline it instilled, and how martial arts became his outlet after injuries ended his diving career. He'd trained with renowned instructors across various disciplines. But he also spoke of failures, fights he'd lost, moments of doubt, times when his own ego had been his worst enemy. "Every scar's a lesson," he said, his voice steady. "You don't get strong by winning. You get strong by getting back up." Kenji listened, his earlier arrogance replaced by a quiet resolve. He saw in Statham a mirror of what he could become, not just a fighter, but a man who carried his strength with humility. Hoshino, sipping his tea, watched the exchange with a faint smile, knowing the lesson had taken root. The next morning, the dojo buzzed with the story of the mysterious foreigner who'd bested Kenji. Word spread through Tokyo's martial arts community, whispers of the action star mingling with awe at his skill. Kenji returned to training with a new focus, his taunts replaced by encouragement for his peers. He began to mentor younger students, sharing the lesson he'd learned on the mat. The dojo, too, felt the ripple of Statham's visit, a reminder that mastery was not about dominance, but about balance. Statham left Tokyo a few days later, slipping back into the anonymity of the city. But his brief presence lingered in the Hoshino Dojo like a legend. For Kenji, it was a turning point, a moment that redefined his path. He trained harder, not to prove himself, but to honor the art and the man who'd shown him its deeper meaning. And somewhere in the city, as Statham boarded a plane, he smiled, knowing he'd left behind more than a sparring match. He'd left a spark that would burn bright in a young fighter's heart. A story that would echo long after the dojo's doors closed for the night.